Uncles, how aunts and uncles sustain family and community life. Aunts and uncles could be called the forgotten kin because we tend to prioritize parents and grandparents when we think of family relationships. Patty Sotirin, an emerita professor of communication and a research professor at Michigan Tech University, is going to discuss how we have been shaped through our relationships with our aunts and uncles. Patty will share with us the many roles of an aunt or uncle and the ongoing importance of extended kinship connections. Patty is the co author of Aunting. Oh, you probably can't see it. I don't know if you can see the book, but I have a copy along with Laura Ellingson, published in 2010. I've had the good fortune of having many special experiences with my nephews and nieces, and I'm looking forward to hearing about Patty's research and thoughts on the topic. Thank you so much, Patty, for presenting this morning from Texas. That's not where she lives. She lives in La Crosse. But anyway, thank you so much, Patty. And after her presentation, there will be time for questions and answers. Thanks so much, Patty.
Thank you, Joan. Dave, I have a little OK in my upper corner here. Should I click it? It says OK. All right. Well,
I'm not sure what that's for,
It's
but
probably that you're being recorded. Sometimes you have to click
Oh.
OK.
all right.
Okay.
Okay. So I apparently that was it. I've clicked it. I'm being recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Joan. And I really appreciate this opportunity to share my work on aunts and uncles. And I'm really very humbled that we're doing this on a weekend during the Indigenous Peoples celebrations. So, yeah, thank you. I'm grateful. Um, anyway, later I'm hoping to hear your own stories about aunts and uncles. And I want to thank you for having me here virtually. I do live in La Crosse. I'm now in Texas, and I know that some of you are in various places as well. So it's just really wonderful that we can be together this way. Although I do have to tell you that I love the UP. I miss the UP so much, and I would be there in person with you if I could. All right, let me get started here. When Joan asked me to do this talk, she mentioned that she recently took her nephew on a Yooper adventure, and she's thinking about taking her niece on an adventure too. And I guess that makes her the cool outdoor woodsy aunt. I bet almost all of us can tell stories about being or having aunts and uncles in being nieces and nephews. So I hope you'll reflect on those experiences as I go through this talk, and maybe you'll share some of your stories with us at the end. As Joan mentioned, with my co-author Laura Ellingson, and that's Laura there, she teaches at Santa Clara University. We've written 2 books and several scholarly articles on the cultural significance of the ant and what ants actually do that makes them so important in our lives. A lot of what we found out is relevant to uncles, too. Now, the pink book over there, that book's about ants in popular culture. It turns out that this is a stock family character in books, TV, and movies. We looked at characters like, let's be a little nostalgic, but we looked at characters like Aunt Bee on the Andy Griffith Show, Auntie Mame in the movies, and the aunts who were mothers to Sabrina the Teenaged Witch, if you remember that. We also looked at the marketing appeal of aunt figures like Auntie Anne's Pretzels and the racial history of Aunt Jemima. The other book, the one in the middle there, is based on interviews, and that's the one I'm going to rely on today. We learned a lot about family, kinship, gendered roles, and sustaining community life as we did that book. One thing we realized early in our project was that most family studies are focused on the nuclear family, that's parents and children. An extended family is often thought about as grandparents. So aunts and uncles are sometimes called forgotten kin, at least as far as research is concerned. But when you start to widen the family circle, you get a much richer picture of modern family life. Now, this project started when Laura and I were at a conference talking about our families. That picture isn't of us, but I like their attitude to kind of remind us of us at a conference. Anyway, Laura doesn't have children, but she talked at length about her wonderful nieces and the close relationships they shared. And I started wondering why I don't have similar stories about my nephews. Instead, I thought of them as the cousins who were good friends with my own kids. Of course, we're both aunts, but what that meant for each of us was really different. And we realized that there's no rule book for how to be an aunt or an uncle, which is quite different than being a parent. There are lots of rules and laws governing parenting. So we started asking people about ants. We interviewed lots of people, different parts of the country, from various ethnic and racial groups, of varying ages, and in person or through email. Our prompts were pretty simple. Tell me about your aunt, or tell me about being an aunt. And you know what? People wanted to talk to us. This is the only study I've done where people came to us asking if we would interview them. People would stop me in the halls or as I walked across campus. Now, our research shows that the aunt or uncle relationship is quite variable. If you have two uncles, one might be grumpy or mean or stodgy, the other might be a fun playmate. This is also a very responsive relationship. Racial, ethnic, and cultural traditions matter. For example, in some traditions, a senior aunt or uncle is an honored elder at the heart of family life. Geographic locations matter. Urban or rural, west or south, whether you say aunt or aunt. And of course, economic circumstances matter. Poverty, affluence, or sudden changes in fortune can alter how aunting and uncling matter. Finally, this relationship changes, sometimes dramatically, as things happen, but especially over the life course of aunts, uncles, nieces, and nephews. The point is that we don't have relationships in a static sort of way. It's too bad that we often say, I have an aunt, with the same intonation as I have a hat, because relationshiping is a verb. And that's why I like to talk about aunting and uncling, because it reminds me that this is a kinship relation that exists through its practices. Let me highlight a few examples to show you what I mean. I'll start with the savvy auntie. This aunt has become quite popular in social media. There are lots of influencers posting videos, blogs, and memes about themselves as cool aunties. I thought the meme about the root beer in the lower corner was amusing, but there are hundreds of others. The Savvy Auntie logo in the lower corner is a long-running advice forum about aunting that popularized the acronym PANK, or Professional Aunt No Kids. And of course, the image at the opposite top corner is the Rich Auntie No Kids, or rank parody on Saturday Night Live. You can find all sorts of candles, coffee mugs, t-shirts, and towels emblazoned with cool aunt images and messages. And there's plenty of cool uncle kitsch too. I was interviewed last year for the Los Angeles Times article. That's the title on the top there. The journalist wrote, quote, "The cool aunt is much more than her trappings. She is a woman who defies the limitations of gender prescribed on women, and therein lies the appeal." Well, I agree. Despite her conspicuous consumption, a family's cool aunt often models the courage to pursue non-traditional life choices. And that's an important message for nieces, nephews, and I think really for all of us in these times. Now, in our interviews, we heard about a variation on these cool kin. That's the auntie or uncle as a special friend. These aunts and uncles are not only interpersonal influences, but secret keepers and soulmates. One niece gave us a great example. She said, I often talk to my aunt about problems that I have with my parents. She listens and offers a different perspective. Oh, and if I need someone to talk to about taboo issues that would make my mom go into cardiac arrest, I call Auntie. This special relationship may involve an older adult and a younger niece or nephew, but sometimes the aunt or uncle or niece and nephew are close in age, or the aunt or uncle could even be younger than the niece or nephew. The ages sometimes don't seem to matter. A cool uncle might know the kind of music a nephew is into, or be just as good or even better at his favorite video games. Regardless of age difference, the important thing is that this uncle keys into what is important to his nephew. One thing we heard over and over about a beloved aunt or uncle was that they sincerely cared about getting to know who the niece or nephew really was. For example, one young woman told us that her aunt gave her gifts that were specially chosen for her, in contrast to an aunt who sent Barbie dolls for several years in a row. I don't mean to suggest that this relationship is based on gift giving. In fact, it's so much more than that. Laura's experience with her nieces was an example of the reciprocal relation of trust and affection that an aunt and niece can share. It's a special relationship that matters to both parties. For nieces and nephews, this special relationship can afford an invaluable source of wisdom, support, and insight. For example, one young Mennonite nephew told me that while he was growing up, his aunt was the only person he trusted with his secret about sexual identity, and she encouraged him to be brave enough to go away to college when the time came. As we age, the savvy role might switch, with the niece or nephew taking on the trusted confidant and wise friend role for an elderly aunt or uncle. This might involve a determined effort to maintain ongoing connections with an older relative, maybe taking the kids for visits, or smiling through yet another iteration of an oft-told story, or even actual elder care tasks. But there may be other aspects to switching roles. One niece told us a bittersweet story about such a switch. She said, quote, "My aunt was my idol. In my eyes, she was beautiful, kind, happy. She was perfect. And I grew up and discovered her tremendous irresponsibility. I truly have lost all respect for who she is. It seems as though when we talk, that I'm the grown-up and that I'm the mature adult." Well, as I noted before, the auntie or uncle relationship is dynamic and responsive, especially to life course changes. Another aunt figure that I want to highlight is the maternal aunt. People often describe their aunts as just like a mother to me, but the aunt isn't your mother, so she isn't expected to live up to the ideals we hold for motherhood. And that affords the maternal aunt a lot of flexibility. She might be the woman whose home everyone comes to after school or for family gatherings. She might be the maternal shoulder you cry on, whose warm embrace fortified you. Or she might be a strict disciplinarian who doesn't put up with whatever you can get away with from your parents. There are also aunts who provide invaluable family services, especially childcare and foster care. Some communities take this as a given that aunties will do mother work. In our interviews with nieces and nephews from Hawaii, they talked about the calabash auntie, who is a neighborhood mother figure. A classic sociological study of Black urban families named such women other mothers. Finally, along with care and affection, maternal figures might provide financial support, as do uncles, especially those who take on patriarch roles in the extended family. Another beloved figure is the eccentric uncle or aunt. My images here are caricatures because these figures often embody persistent cultural stereotypes. The spinster aunt who defies demands that women marry. The devil-may-care bachelor uncle who won't settle down. The imperious rich aunt or uncle who will hopefully leave an inheritance to properly fawning nieces and nephews. In popular culture, we have Auntie Mame or Uncle Scrooge. In family stories, these figures might be cautionary tales or inspirational lessons. I came across a story about an eccentric uncle recently that seems to summarize this relationship. His niece described her uncle as her opposite. She said, "I was bubbly and smiley and athletic. He was grouchy and crotchety and fantastically artistic. I think the most fun part with him was he would take us to places that most people would never take a child, like the opera or backstage at the theater. He would introduce you as if you were a tiny adult and expect you to behave. If you didn't, he'd look you dead in the eye and tell you, "You're being a brat." She concluded that he adored me as much as he hated me. We both understood each other, and it was perfect. Well, that might have been a bit of an exaggeration, but it isn't unusual to feel both love and distaste or amusement and embarrassment for our eccentric aunts and uncles. And yet, we may be inspired by the way they show us how to color outside the lines. One really important aspect of aunting and uncling is kin work. This includes a range of practices that maintain families and communities. One of these is kin keeping. Kin keeping involves several activities that often fall to aunts. One is maintaining family connections. It's typically aunts who encourage family events and stay in touch with extended family members. Take Thanksgiving dinner. It's often a family affair at an aunt's house, with other aunts contributing their own special dishes for the meal. It's the aunts who get in touch with everyone and organize such collective family efforts. It's aunts who remember to send birthday cards and make sure everyone is included on group texts. Although I do know several uncles who send out family group texts accompanied by a blast of pictures from recent family events. Another aspect of kin keeping is the responsibility to pass along family histories, stories, and traditions that tell us who we are and what makes us distinct as a family. Uncles may be storytellers who narratively document historical moments or personal tall tales, like the uncle in my campfire picture there. But it's aunts, like the yayas in the other picture, who are often keepers of family lore and gossip, from old recipes to the latest rumors about extended kin. Then there's the idea of generativity, or a responsibility to future generations. Aunts and uncles may work to extend their family legacy through the children of the extended family, or nieces and nephews may express their desire to pay forward the support they received from an aunt or uncle. In some communities, aunts and uncles may play the role of godmothers and godfathers. That's a formalized role of generativity. One niece touched on both of these forms of generativity when she said, "My sister asked me to be my niece's godmother. I've decided I'm going to be the best aunt to that little girl. I hope that I can be as good an aunt to her as my auntie was to me." Another aspect of kin work is sorting out the everyday responsibilities of being an aunt or uncle in the face of parental authority, family hierarchies, and social expectations. An aunt or uncle may be confronted by what they see as questionable for the well-being of a child or family member. And suddenly, they have to navigate tricky boundaries and situational dilemmas. Sometimes an aunt or uncle will intervene, express their opinion, even get into an argument. But a frequent choice of action is to do nothing. Doing nothing isn't passive, it's a morally chosen act in itself. If my sister allows her daughter to wear clothing I find inappropriate, I may just not say anything because it's not my place and I defer to parental authority. Or I worry that my remarks might aggravate the situation. Or I'm afraid that I might jeopardize my access to my niece. So, good aunting might involve a kind of inaction, like speaking cautiously, looking away, or holding back. Aunts and uncles can feel a lot of uneasiness, hesitation, and self doubt about the moral responsibilities of aunting or uncling. When they decide not to act, this is invisible work that can have important impacts on family relationships. What about extended kin with whom you have very little, if any, contact? This could be due to geographic distance, they just live too far away, or emotional estrangement, of falling out among family members, or the complications of divorce, remarriage, and blended families. Whatever the reason, these relationships still exert what scholars call an absent presence. This means that the actual person may be absent from your life, but they have a presence in your family story and therefore in your understanding of yourself. It was fascinating that people would inevitably tell me about how a particular aunt or uncle fit into the family network. We don't see her much, but she's my uncle's first wife. Or, he used to be my dad's favorite brother, but now we don't speak to him. The concept of family figurations means the webs of interdependent, negotiated, and always sticky relationships that give family life durability through change. In our interviews, we heard stories about long held feuds, and sometimes maintaining those distances can be best for everyone. But sometimes a 20-something niece or nephew would talk about reaching out to an absent aunt or uncle despite their parents' long held animosities. Or an aunt or uncle talked about making a post divorce effort to become more present in a niece or nephew's life. Chosen kin are not relatives, genetically or legally, but the designation often recognizes bonds of affection, mutuality, and shared resources. A friend of the family, a favorite teacher, or an other mother can be named an aunt or uncle. There are lots of labels for these chosen kin relationships, like fictive kin, pseudo kin, quasi kin, or voluntary kin. Recent studies have found that chosen kin networks are important across racial and ethnic groups, class strata, sexual minorities, and among older adults. So it's not just one group or another. Chosen kin are important to all of us. And these kin networks have long served to sustain family and community life against historic and ongoing hardships. But kin networks are still important today for maintaining and strengthening family solidarity and for providing reliable support. People spoke fondly about an aunt who was a mother's best friend, or an uncle who was a dad's fishing buddy. Naming someone an aunt or uncle often underlines durable ties of affection, care, and presence. Now, another form of chosen kin is the mentor or role model at work or school. In fact, Laura and I have argued that it might be helpful to call mentoring relationships auntoring relationships so that we can get beyond transactional expectations like the mentee's feeling of obligation or the mentor's expectation that the mentee will loyally advance their reputation. Instead, aunting and uncling could legitimate relational dimensions of mentoring, like empathy and friendship. Okay, so aunting probably won't catch on and replace mentoring, but it does point to how the labels we use confer expectations and assumptions and lock us into certain ways of knowing and doing our identities and relationships. An eccentric aunt or uncle is often stereotyped as gay or lesbian. It's a way to account for what isn't conventional. But at the same time, there's an entrenched femininity to the figure of the aunt. When they talked about aunts, people readily used feminine attributes like sweet, pretty, motherly, and nice. But taken for granted gendering in this way points to inadequacies in our language, practices, and frankly, in our collective imagination. What's an appropriate title for a trans man or woman who's mapped into a family figuration as an aunt or uncle? The term uncle was suggested by the online LGBTQ dictionary, but frankly, it's awkward. The bi or trans extended family member underscores the ways our conventional assumptions limit how we do and love our families. This image is of a gay uncle and his niece with a book he wrote for her about their relationship. My hope is that we'll find new ways and new words to honor the multiplicities of family relationships. Aunting has had a critical impact in LGBTQ plus communities. Rather than a stereotype, the eccentric aunt or uncle can be an invitation to be oneself, whether gay, femme, queer, or non binary, and to embrace alternate family forms of embodiment, kinship, and caring. Queer Aunties is the name of several online projects that advance minoritarian identities, families, and communities. For example, there's a self help advice blog called the Queer Auntie Chronicles and a Queer Aunties web based event platform, and this image on the screen is from their website. They provide a safe haven for Black and Brown LGBTQIA plus culture and community. Finally, there's a proposed field of study called critical auntie studies, which explains itself as, quote, at its core, a trans, queer, and feminist project. A founding member explains that, quote, while many people are critical of the nosy, nitpicky, never satisfied auntie, I wonder how her dissatisfaction might propel inquiry and keep radical politics in motion. My work with Laura has been a useful resource for critical auntie studies, and I'm thrilled, and I hope there's more to come. So I've talked about why aunts and uncles are valuable and beloved family members, and how aunting and uncling, I almost did that. Aunting and uncling supports us as individuals, families, and communities. You might have recognized yourself in some of my descriptions of savvy aunties or cool uncles. You might have remembered one or another of the variations of maternal aunts, who are like a mother or another mother. Or your uncle might be the family storyteller. Or maybe it's you, sitting at a campfire with your nieces and nephews. I know that your aunting and uncling relationships have made a difference in your life and the lives of people close to you at one time or another. So I hope you'll share some of those stories with me now. I would love to hear them. Won't you tell me about your aunt or uncle, or what it's been like for you to be an aunt or uncle?
Are you saying you want to open this up now, Patty?
Yes.
All right.